All right, and we are on the air. Everybody, welcome into the Fifth Dimension podcast. On the show today, I have filmmaker Eric Christiansen joining the Fifth Dimension. Eric, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Hey, Evan. As we say in California, I'm stoked to be here. No, I
I
really am. I'm excited. I love the mindfulness. I love. I'm down for this
Yes,
conversation and try to progress a little bit here.
absolutely. Well, I love the California vibes. I mean, we were talking a little bit before we came on the air about California, and I think we're coming from the same wavelength here. So
Oh, totally.
I'm excited to have you on. So
Great.
I watched your trailers for your new documentary film that you did, unMASKing Hope. It looks phenomenal, by the way. I'm excited to see the full film when it comes out. I mean, before jumping into the film specifically, I read a little bit about your story and the background you're coming from. I would love to sort of hear what got you into the line of work that you're doing with filmmaking in terms of really profiling trauma and recovery and uh, how you came into this field, because I think it's very unique to be approaching that from a filmmaking standpoint, and it's really powerful.
Well, I super appreciate that, and I look forward to talking about unmasking hope because that's kind of where I'm at on the path right now. But if we rewind way back to like about second or third grade, that's when I started making films. And to date myself here, I was shooting in regular 8 film on an old camera. And I remember, around 8 or 9 years old, putting these films together and cutting them on my little flat, flat top on my desk and everything. And I was thinking, man, I have some sort of message to give, but I never really knew what it was yet at that point. But I kept progressing and making films. That's all I've ever wanted to do is be a filmmaker. I had about a week, maybe I wanted to be a firefighter. That was a passing phase. And then, come about, it was 30 years ago. The Painted Cave fire disaster came through Santa Barbara on June 27th, 1990, and took my home and all my possessions. At that point, I was working professionally. I was doing a lot of editing, a little bit of directing. I was doing a lot of music videos, a lot of national commercials, a lot of flash and things like that. But also I was very involved in drugs and alcohol in that whole scene. And but that fire came along and kind of literally flattened everything and took everything I had away. And I was left with just myself, basically. And it took me about 7 months to really figure out what that was. And it was excruciating 7 months. And towards the end of that 7 months, the woman that's my wife now gave me this guy's card and said, "Hey, this is Don R. You can go see him. He's found a way out of this whole, addiction thing that you're in and everything." And, I was at my wit's end, and I actually went to this and met this guy, ended up going to this program for people that have problems with drugs and alcohol. And I'll remain anonymous through this, but that really changed my life. And after that fire and during that whole period, I was fascinated in getting sober and starting, my eyes were awakening. I was wakening up to a whole different kind of work. And I noticed that the people that had survived that fire had a way of talking with each other. And it was very difficult to kind of explain the experience to people outside of our circle that we weren't identifying with, the people that had not been through it. So naively, I'm like, hey, I want to do like a documentary about this. And I set about, in my first year of sobriety, putting together this film called Faces in the Fire. And it was about a group of survivors of a disaster and their recovery, not about like the disaster. It wasn't about the fire. Really, the fire was just the catalyst for us to take this journey. That was, none of us asked for it, but it was, most of us came out a little bit better for it. And I definitely did. And we premiered that film a year at the year anniversary of the fire with the American Red Cross. And the amount of healing that I saw the amount of healing that I had by participating in it. And then not only did it win my first Emmy Award, which was a big deal for me at the time, but later it was picked up by the National Institute of Mental Health as a tool for helping other fire survivors and teaching counselors how to debrief and work with people that have been through disasters. And that was the birth of my calling. That's where it all came from. And it wasn't, I was no longer, it was no longer a job or whatever you might call it. It became my calling. And I was hooked. And then, I had a series of 2 more films since then, personal films that I've done based on trauma and healing that we can go talk about. But that's where this whole thing comes from. And it's really is a calling. It's way more than
that's beautiful. And that's I can sort of see, the passion in that calling and the transformation that you sort of had to endure yourself and go through this hardship, but then come out from it, with a calling, come out being able to be resilient and being able to be, hopeful and helpful to others who are going through similar or even different traumas. I feel like there's so many different traumas that people are approaching life with. And, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, working on, these past films. Like what, we come from so many different backgrounds. We all have so many different traumas. What sort of the commonalities are in that, and how we can learn from others' experiences to better our own and face our own traumas. And, it's almost sort of like coming together, and there's a sense of like unification and unity in that. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
Well, there's two main pieces to that. And, the one is what are the commonalities of healing in people that went through trauma? And the other one is, the other question is, everybody that goes through trauma, and we're going through a collective trauma right now as a world, as a nation. And the more we kind of realize that we're all in the same boat, we really don't know what's going on with this whole pandemic thing.
Right.
The more that we can kind of connect around that. But, during the trauma and after the trauma, and basically after the trauma, every survivor kind of has this point where they have to make a decision. And it's sometimes they feel sometimes it's made for them, but really I think we have control, and a lot of it's based on our spiritual condition also. But, you have a choice of letting something take you down, letting something, I have a good example of it. When the fire came, I had a really nice house, and my mom had the top levels of the house, and I lived in the bottom levels of this house in the foothills. And that fire really became the catalyst for her entropy and her spiral. That was, and she kind of, I could see her kind of make that decision, and it was very sad to watch. That was the beginning of the end for her. But for me, it was the beginning of my life. I point back to that fire. So I think every trauma survivor has a point where they make a decision if they're going to be able to put this in their toolkit, basically, and say, this is something that's happened to me, and I'm going to try to make the best of it and move ahead. Or it can knock you sideways. And there are some very real issues that come with trauma but I've seen people fight back from way, way back and then and make it. And so that's one of the issues there. And I love how cool is it to be able to go through something really, using California term, really gnarly, and then be able to use it again in a positive way because somebody else is going through the same thing,
right?
And reach out to them. And that's the key, is like helping somebody else. The other thing is the commonalities of trauma survivors that I see time and time again are, going back to the COVID thing, we're all in this together. We all heal the same way. When I was making my film, Searching for Home, Coming Back from War, I have Sandra Lee. She's a young lady that was a Iraqi veteran in the Army. She has PTSD, and she also has military sexual trauma. and she had it tough. And then I have this other guy in the film we call the Fat Cowboy, Bill Johnson. He's a salt of the earth out of Kansas. He was a Korean War veteran, Marine, American flag, and the whole
Mm,
thing. And the guy's amazing. Just being around these people are amazing. So
yeah.
what did they have in common? You know, and that was like, I'm putting it together and I'm shooting there. I'm in Kansas shooting him. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so different than Sandra Lee in New York.
Right.
And she's, you know, she came back to theater and she has a love of theater that helped her heal. But when I'm starting to put the film together, they're saying the same things because they're healing the same way, because we're all human. And I personally believe our creator has put this system into us of healing that's similar to when we get a scab, when we fall down and get a scab, it's going to heal a certain way. And so does trauma, you
Mm,
know, and some of the best practitioners understand this and they really use that flow. But I see time and time again, these disparate different traumas, but they're telling the same story. It's just different, and it's very unifying. It's very it it has an ability to create a huge amount of empathy in the individual because they connect and
mm,
they see all these people healing. Oh, that's the same as me, even though I didn't do that.
right.
And that empathy produces tolerance, and that's what I love. Is when people come away with a little bit of empathy, a little bit of understanding and awareness out of my films and have this tolerance because, oh, that's what they're going through. I felt that before. So,
Mhm. Right. And I think what you talk about with both choice and with that sense, cultivating that sense of empathy is really the path to healing, because I know people personally who have been through, horrific traumas, and they haven't necessarily fully committed to the choice of healing, because I feel it's as if almost our identities become attached to specific traumas. Like
wow.
what are
Yeah.
we without trauma? What does it look like to, and that's not necessarily, I feel like, what people are telling themselves, but it's sort of almost a subconscious um, part of our identity in a way. And I would love to hear sort of how everything you just brought up, with this choice and with coming from all of these different backgrounds, especially in your new film, Unmasking Hope, how that sort of looks and plays out. Because I mean, you're talking to, I believe, 9/11 first responders and survivors, and war veterans, and survivors of sexual abuse. So you're coming from a lot of different angles there. I mean, did you sort of find the same thing, and what has that experience been like for you?
I, I'm sorry. I'm laughing a little bit because I'm on that precipice right now as creating this piece
Yeah.
where I was with Searching for Home.
Hmm.
When I was putting Searching for Home, how does Sandra Lee really fit together with Fat Cowboy? Is it going to work? Oh my
Hmm.
gosh. You know, I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, in my quiet meditation, I'm like, I have to go, okay, is this working? And so the answer to that is where I'm at with that right now. I feel that we have over 80% of all the interviews in,
Hmm.
and it is 9/11 survivors, the sexual abuse survivors. And it's I always take another I take one of the people from one of my previous films and put it in my next film, and Sandra Lee's in there. And so we have and then we have a police officer, first responder. And so I'm just starting the editing process right now,
Hmm.
and so I am feeling those patterns. It's ingrained in, well, it's ingrained in us,
Hmm.
but it's also part of the pattern of how I'm able to work with the people and interview them and get to the core in the same way with each one.
Hmm.
And it's much more than just an interview and thank you so much and we're out of here. You know, we make big
Right.
connections with these people. And but to answer your question, yeah, I can feel that rhythm. I can feel that energy and that connection that they all have. Now I actually have to physically go into that edit suite where the magic happens, literally being led into some of these things and start to overlay all the stories. And that gets into a whole kind of talking about my techniques of how I actually edit and put these together so I can make the stories mirror and work.
Hmm.
But yeah, we're right in the place where I'm feeling that it's working, but I still have a little bit of that feeling of the leap of faith and stepping off the cliff, you know. And I love what Kenny Loggins says. He goes, you know, the leap of faith is either you're going to land and be okay, or
Hmm.
you're going to learn how to fly. And you know, I'm at that stepping off point with this film, and I'm taking a lot of more chances than I normally do, because we're putting animation in this. We're talking to a dance troupe. We're putting a lot of stuff in this to try to express these emotions. It's to push the storytelling, and it's to push it past, you know, our conscious brain into like the subconscious, into our souls. But going back, yeah, I feel it,
Yeah,
and it'll happen, but it's still, I still get the butterflies. And
definitely. I know exactly what you're saying. It's still in the creation process.
yeah,
So it's like, all right, I don't know what that final how it's going to look when it's finally done, but I know that it's in the works of being what it feels like. I mean, that's sort
yeah,
of I did the same thing with my podcast. I just took a leap of faith. I had no idea what I was doing, and I'm just like, well, if I screw up, then I at least I tried. Like it's one of those things, and you just sort of go with the flow of it. I feel like that connects to almost a lot of the things we've been talking about as well, with trauma, and with sort of letting go process. It's almost a leap of faith in itself, and it's almost a grand unknown, if you will, and it is not necessarily easy to engage in this type of inner work and look into what's sort of lurking in the subconscious. And like working with the people that you did in unmasking hope, I mean, what has sort of been, I suppose, your takeaways from that, personally? How do you having been there, been um a survivor of trauma and being where you're at now, I mean, what could you speak to about adversity, and speak to of hope, and getting to interact with this wide range of people, and what sort of impression has that left for you, not just as a filmmaker, but just as a person too?
you know, I'm constantly inspired by working with these people. And you know, there's two keys I see time and time again: is a self-honesty that these people have, that are on the road to healing.
Hmm.
And it's like when you can really be honest with yourself and with your situation of what happened, basically just meet that trauma eye to eye and be able to talk about it. That's one of the things I see that's common in people that really move forwards in the healing. And that's really inspiring to see, and that makes me really look at myself, and that self rigorous honesty. You know,
Hmm.
am I an honest, person? The other thing I see is a willingness to reach out and help others.
Hmm.
And when I see that in a survivor, I know they're well on the path to healing. And
Right.
those things they're easy to talk about, but they're very difficult to attain. You know, and then, well, let me go back to the even before the self honesty. This just into my head is the ability to just ask for help
Hmm. Right.
and say, you know what, something's a little bit off here, and I need some help. That really helps. I mean, a big mechanism of that is finding somebody else like you, finding
Yeah.
somebody else that has went through a similar situation. Then you have this immediate identification and know you're not alone. So it's a lot easier to reach out. And then you can aspire to what they're doing. That's one of the functions of my films, is to be aspirational in a way that people can see other people that have walked this walk, identify with it, not feel alone, and then take that step towards healing. But
Hmm.
those are the three things, and I should write them down as soon as I'm done, because it's asking for help, it's a brutal self honesty, and it's helping others. And those are three things I see in common to people that are really really healing. And then the other thing is, it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough to get over things. It's like getting over things. That's a terrible word. That's a terrible connection of words. Because when I think about the 9/11 survivor Becky, and I think about, that being 18 years ago, plus 18 plus years ago,
Yeah.
and I see how it still affects her today. You know, much less my veterans. I call them just my friends, my people.
Right.
But when I see them, and it's just like, how long ago was that? But it's just so imprinted on them today. And that's what we have to understand. This stuff just doesn't go away. It
Right.
gets better, and we learn workarounds, and we learn how to honor it in our life and build our life around it. And then that becomes successful too,
Mm,
to overcome. It's like,
definitely. Definitely. And I feel like that idea you mentioned, getting over things. You're right in the sense that it is it's almost like a rigorous word. It's almost like it has this, like you expect it to just sort of go away, when in reality our our whole life, our whole identity, our whole, everything that we know about ourselves can be defined by a specific event, like especially something like 9/11. I can't even imagine being a survivor of that, that type of event. And I certainly hold empathy for those who went through that, and I see the sort of the pain and that's caused. And simply telling somebody to get over it, like, yeah, I feel like you hear that phrase, it it's almost sort of like a slap in the face to the experience in a way. And so I really like how
oh, yeah.
you talked about how that is, it's more about learning to live and learning to cope and integrate it into our experience, because that willingness to help others, I feel like, especially, like what you're doing right now, making, um, basically through the eyes of your camera and your movies, and basically through a lens, you're telling the stories of these resilient people, and that is able to in turn help somebody else who may view the film. And I think that is, if let's say you had got over the fire, or per se, like in terms of that idea, like you
Stuffed
maybe
it down.
yeah, stuffed it down, what we're kind of taught to do in a way. And I work in schools, and that's an entire rabbit hole that you could go
Oh my
down.
God.
But if you had just sort of stuffed it away, then what impact does that experience that you had, how can it be a positive impact on others? And I think that it sort of gets into this idea that we are all connected, we are all in this world together, and we can make a difference with our experience. And that's almost like maybe the final step in terms of the healing process, I feel like. I mean, I've had traumas in my own life. I don't like to necessarily compare situations, but I'm not a veteran. I didn't survive 9/11. There's nothing like that pops into my mind that is like massive event per se. But I've had to learn to cope with specific things in my own life, and I feel like talking about things openly can help others. And there's a lot of healing
Mhm.
that I've had to endure, with mental health and you know uh, death, and just a whole bunch of different subject areas. So, and with like trauma, I feel like it's easy to identify what a trauma is, but that idea of healing from it and the steps to take to heal from it, it can be really daunting. It can be really a difficult thing for a lot of people to engage in. So I applaud the work you're doing with, you know, this sort of filmmaking and this storytelling. And, you know, I mean, would you say this is like, what, you found your calling, and how would you say, like, what is it? Trying to think of how I want to phrase the question. Sometimes like words just don't work in my
Oh,
head.
no, no. Sometimes words aren't good enough is the problem. It's like,
Right, exactly. I mean, how have you sort of been able to take these experiences that you've seen and with others, and sort of try and show that that first step is, the willingness to ask for help is something that we should be encouraging people to do? And how can we, you know, I guess, make that a more mainstream and okay thing to do? Because I feel like we are taught to isolate. So kind of like, I feel like it's easy to identify, like, what trauma is, but it's not easy to take that first step and ask for help. And,
Mm,
what are ways we can sort of make that easier, make it more integrated into just culture, society, and like sort of the idea of community. Like, I feel like we're very much an individualistic world. Like, that's sort of what we've been programmed into, designed into, like conditioned to live by. So like, how do we make that, this idea of asking for help, more of an easier process, I suppose.
you know, what really, what that really brings up to me, that question is, a lot of people think, well, if I just go ask for help, it's just going to bring this stuff up all again, and I'm going to have to just get beat over the head with it again. I put it behind me. I got over it.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of fear involved in that. And it makes me think about Fat Cowboy, the Korean War veteran, and he, I mean, his PTSD was diagnosed, I think, 35 years after the fact, and he lived this
Hmm.
life where he was at the whim of his trauma
Hmm.
and his whole family. And they're a beautiful family, and they stuck together through the whole thing. And somebody finally diagnosed him and with PTSD, and he's like, I am not going to go into that room with a bunch of hairy-legged, this is what he says, a hairy-legged old boys, and relive all this stuff. He goes, that's what I don't want to do that. And people are scared of, if they ask for help, that's what's going to happen. But here's what happened with Fat Cowboy's story. He found out his story was worth something.
Hmm.
His story was worth a lot, because his story was worth so much to these other new guys that are coming back from war. Here's this old guy that's like Purple Heart, Korean War veteran, and he's been through it. And he found out that it completely validated his journey by being able to help these guys that are coming home now and say, yeah, I understand.
Hmm.
And then these guys that are coming home brand new, fresh out of, Iraq, Afghanistan, they're able to see this icon. I mean, the guy's classic. He was a beautiful man, but it validated his existence. And so the answer to your question is like, I try to portray in my films on the other side of getting through that, admitting that you have a problem, being you know, going through your trauma again. On the other side of that is that, for me, it's God that makes it useful to other people. It's, you find the right people, and then you can share that, and it completely is one of the most valuable things you can do for society, is
Hmm.
to share what you've been through. I made it through, and this is how I did it, and grab somebody else's hand and take them through it.
Right.
And so that's kind of the answer to that. It's like, just if anybody's listening, just know that your story is valuable,
Hmm.
and for me, as a process in working with all these survivors, I honor everybody. Everybody's story is sacred. They've given me their life story. I have a sacred story. And Neil Young has this great quote about, like, I've been given these sacred stories, and I have to carry them and hold them and care, and take care of them, guard them, when he's talking about songwriting and things. And that's how I feel. It's a crazy responsibility that I have. But I want those people, and then I carry it over to the other side so other people can see it, and then other people can be touched, because those stories, there's somebody, I tell people in my films that there's somebody out there, just maybe only one person, usually a lot more, that need to hear that story.
Right.
And it's the same with personal recovery. That's how it really works. You've been put through this for a reason. It goes back to what we were talking about several minutes ago, is that you can look at this a couple different ways. And one of the ways to look through this is, you've been put through this for a reason, because there's somebody else that's going through it that's going to need your help. Trauma is just a factor of life,
Right.
and it's just the way it works. And so if you can actually then use your experience, ask for help, and help comes in so many different modalities. It's not just therapy. It ends up being so many different things. And then come out that other side and then find somebody else, and put your hand up. And so that's the answer to that for me. And I feel very strongly about that.
Absolutely. And I think that's beautiful. And this idea, everybody's story is worth something. Everybody's story is worth telling. And, something that sometimes people ask me about, like my podcast, for example, like who I'm willing to have on. And a lot of times my answer is I will have anybody on, because I think
That's awesome.
everybody, everybody has something valuable within, their own perspective and their own, their own experience that is worth sharing, that is, valuable to other people. And I think we can really embrace the idea. Um, we can make it personal in a sense that if we look at everybody as our teacher, like anybody you interact with can be a teacher for you. You can learn from one another. Then that also means that you could be a teacher to somebody else. And so it adds this whole level of meaning to our, what our purpose is in life, even if maybe somebody doesn't know what it is exactly they want to do. Like you found your calling through filmmaking, but you have this purpose to help others and share with others so that they can overcome similarly. And I feel like as a society, that's something maybe we should start gravitating more towards in terms of how we organize ourselves, how it is that, what is it that we prioritize? What is it that, as humans, what is it that actually matters, and how can we create something that, is uh a world that is like that for everybody. And I think it creates sort of almost community, and the idea that we are all in this together. And I always say that, and it's difficult to actually like quantify what that might look like, just because we don't live in it. It's like your film, right? You don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but you have this feeling, this idea, this notion of how it could, how it will be, how it would be. So I think if we work towards that feeling, it's ultimately, it's sort of, it's a beautiful idea to work towards collectively and embracing in our own lives. And I mean, would you say that the people you've been able to work with through overcoming have been able to sort of find this greater purpose, this idea that, that they're here, their life has deep meaning beyond just almost sort of looking at the world larger than the individual self? Like you find sort of this higher calling in most of the people you've been able to work with?
It's unfortunately it's not in most of the people, but it's in quite a few of the people. And my
Mhm.
personal heroes, that I have met through this process of making my films are the ones that have taught me about giving themselves away. And
Mhm.
it's usually based around what they've been through. Bob Trimble, the subject of my film, Searching for Home, Coming Back from War. I mean, he passed away about 6 years ago in a plane crash, and he got very close to me and my family. But his whole life, he was either helping another alcoholic. He was in my club, or he was helping a veteran because he was a Purple Heart, Silver Star, Vietnam vet. And when he passed away, he was actually taking a POWMI bracelet, one of the original ones, down to a museum, not far from, he was flying, not far from where he lived, because they had found the guy's remains and they wanted to retire the bracelet. So he was flying it down there, and he's being of service. He wanted to give this bracelet to this POWMI bracelet museum. And but he was very successful to me in the way that his life was a life of service. Then there's J.R. Franklin that's living out in Missouri now, and I first met him in Kansas, and he is a Vietnam vet also, and his whole life is built around helping other veterans, and there's kind of a funny story around that. But he literally will get on his motorcycle and ride night and day across the United States just to help one vet that is willing to be helped by him, and he'll sit with them and take them through the system and whatever needs to be done. But if you want me to entertain you with an interesting
Oh,
story about
always.
veterans,
I'm always for it.
when we were making Homecoming, a Vietnam vet's journey, and this was, I don't know, almost 15, 20 years ago. J.R. Franklin was in the film, and as I said, he's a Vietnam vet, and he's very buttoned down. Everything, he's a biker. You look at his bike, everything's perfect, everything's in its place. And so I asked JR for some pictures, and I need some pictures, and he goes, I have all these pictures from Vietnam, Eric. I'm gonna, I'll get them to you. How do you want them sent? And I'm like, could you just FedEx them? Because I'm in LA. I'm thinking FedEx them, okay? And he's in the middle of like nowhere in Kansas. And so I call him back. I go, did you get those in the mail? He goes, yeah. He goes, it took me 2 days to get the FedEx office. I'm like, what? And he goes, next time can we use UPS? Because it's just down the street here. And what I learned is you have to be very careful with some of these veterans what you ask of, because they take it very literally. What? And that's the most amazing thing about these guys, because their sense of duty, and like once they connect with you,
yeah,
you have a friend for life. I mean, they're some of the most amazing, loyal men I've ever met, and it's just, I have so much respect from the guys I met through Searching for Home to J.R. Franklin. But that was hilarious. Could we use UPS next time? Because it's just down the street. And I'm like, why?
Willing to drive to a few days away just so you could use FedEx. I mean, that does sort of show that that loyalty.
So I was very careful on what when we direct him, when we're like, we did a lot of motorcycle shots in New Mexico with him for Searching for Home. He was a veteran from my other film that went into my next film. And I had to be very, very careful to be very precise how I direct. Okay, we're going to drive down here. We're shooting from the car. You're going to be here. Do this, do that. And then we pull over and he's like, okay. I go, was that okay? And he goes, yes, it was fine, except for you were shooting gravel into my, and he doesn't tell you this. He'll just keep doing it. Anyways, I could tell.
Well, I think it perfectly illustrates that deep sense of loyalty, that connection, and, the willingness to go above and beyond. And, I think that is, you mentioned the word success, and that word is something, like the idea of it is something I've really been toying with in my own head for, and even on the podcast occasionally with guests, like, what does it mean to be successful? Like the idea of success, like we're taught it's, all the money and material goods and luxury and wealth. But, when I hear stories like that, I hear success because it's being of service to others, finding purpose, finding hope. And, I mean, would you say that your definition of success has been, radically changed because of, these experiences and,
day and night? And, I got to say, just, I mean, the perfect definition on success is Ralph Waldo Emerson has this poem on success, and it's to laugh often, to win the respect of intelligent people, et cetera, and to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or helping your fellow man, basically. And I'm just paraphrasing because I don't have the whole thing up in front of me. But
you don't know it by heart?
Yeah, I know I should, right?
No, just playing with you.
No, yeah, but no, it's just if to leave a world a better place by at least helping one other person, and that's. And I look at that and I read it a lot because it pulls me out of that, which is constantly a battle with me, that financial thing, because being a messenger of hope in filmmaking is not like a real
it's a tough career path.
Yeah, and it's just and we are trying to make crossover to make hope and this idea of hope something that people really want to see. We've dealt with unMASKing Hope. We've worked with some of the bigger agencies and trying to turn it into a series, but everybody wants the hook. Everybody wants the excitement. But going back to success, that's, here we go. To know even one life is breathed easier because you have lived. That is to have succeeded. So boom. So I
Right.
got to, there is a point in making unMASKing Hope where I got so involved with the mechanics and like shopping it around Hollywood and getting like meetings and stuff that I completely was miserable, and I'd lost my connection really with what I was doing. I'm going to have to shut my door here because there's a gardener. You're going to have to, I'm
Oh yeah,
sorry for
you're good.
editing that. Yeah, so there was a point with unMASKing Hope where I shopping it around, and we had a couple real serious nibbles for it as a series, and I got so lost in the mechanics and chasing that
Mhm.
that I really did have to go back to that quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson and go, okay, this is success, not necessarily like selling your soul to A&E so you could have a series, and then putting other people at risk because they want to see a car, basically they want to see a train wreck
Right.
out of this and not necessarily see hope.
Mm.
And that's been a frustration in what I do. And finally, thank
Right.
God we have some amazing people, and we're very, very close to finishing unMASKing Hope. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it my way then.
Right.
It's just, so anyways.
But that's true power. I mean, that's true like follow it, sticking to your guns in the end. And I think that is what defines success, because if you when the finished product comes out, if you sort of had that feeling of, I didn't end up getting to do it my way, it almost dilutes the whole process and the whole project, because you're not portraying necessarily what it is you want to portray. And I think success is something that it almost lives beyond like our own physical life, right? I mean, you can't take money to the grave. I mean, you can leave, I suppose you can leave behind money for your family, and well, you can get in that whole debate of things, but it's ultimately, were you able to leave a legacy of love and compassion? And
Yeah.
I always say that I think people have this domino effect of, if you can touch one life, you never know how many other people uh, or how many people that person, that their lives, they impact. So I think if we were able to sort of look, like, quantify that and look at it from like a bird's eye view, we'd almost sort of be shocked by the level of impact we can have just from being our authentic selves and, you know
Oh yeah.
following our purpose. And that's something I almost need to remind myself at times too, because it's the same type of deal where, it's, it's easy to get caught up in financial monetization, and trying to, because money almost equates to freedom in a lot of ways in the world today. So it can be difficult to monetize your purpose per se and live 100% authentically by your purpose. But I mean, I'd say you're doing a good job of it. I look at you as successful because of what you are doing with, the work. And I think if people were to start abiding by that definition of success, it would create a much more open and, beautifully run
Oh yeah.
society.
A
And
whole different, a whole different economy, because, I believe I operate in two different economies. I operate in the world's economy,
mhm,
which is one thing. And then I operate in my spiritual God's economy, which is a whole different thing. But unfortunately, God's economy doesn't buy on this earth a beach house, but
right,
and
right,
but I'm just being real honest about that, and it's it's a tough thing. I remember with searching for home, coming back from war, we had a big time showrunner, and in LA, a showrunner is a person that has a lot of power, basically runs all these different shows, and she came in and saw this and said, "Oh, this is going to be great," and we want to do a series. And the more talks we had, the more I realized she just again wanted to come in and take these veterans. Basically, if they're not in context, it can seem that they're unhinged, I
Mm,
put them in context and I tell their whole story. But if you only take the certain parts of it, you have a lot of drama.
right.
And that's basically what she wanted to do. And I said, I can't do that to these people. I walked away from that. But the film itself, it went on to show 2,300 times in 3 years on public television. And that's a lot of eyes on it. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of lives changed, and in as I say, in God's economy, that's a huge success. Now, was
Absolutely.
it a financial success? No, not necessarily, but you know, I have some amazing angel fund angel donors out of Texas that have helped me with my work because they believe in the vision that I have for
Mm,
what I do. So, but yeah,
definitely.
it's just it's constantly coming together. It's like world economy, God's economy. It's
Right.
like,
Absolutely. That is that I view that as the perfect example of what true wealth, true success is having that fulfillment. Like you could at the end of the day, you can make X amount of money, but you could say I helped people. This helped people. I know that, I'm following the purpose. And I think that is what really life is all about. And when you're able to use your experience to, you know, help others in some form, some capacity, that's really all you can ask for. And it's sort of when we almost detach from the idea that success is all just about money, we can really, as you call it, God's economy. I agree. We can really bathe in that. We can really, relish in that. And then a lot of times, the other side of it, the world economy tends to figure itself out most times. Like it's able to. I mean, certainly there are cases where maybe it doesn't, but a lot of times when you really do emphasize for the greater good, your own personal life, I found for me, it tends to work out even when there's a lot of unknown. And I mean
oh yeah,
that unknown can be scary. And I think the unknown goes back again to, we want to have these clear cut answers. We want to know exactly, like it would be much easier for people to overcome trauma, for example, if it was laid out on a blueprint exactly how it's going to look. Like, all right, tomorrow you're going to be facing this, and then but that sort of shadow, it's like shadow work. You don't know exactly what it's going to look like, you could say. And
well, I still have a belief that I continue on this path. It's like what you're saying, and stay true to what I'm doing. Continue to innovate, I basically, in how I make my films and how I tell the stories and connect with the viewers. That things, I mean, economically might come around that way for me, and
mhm.
that I had a teacher. I went to California Institute of the Arts. I have my hat. Hashtag CalArts Mafia. But one of my teachers, Johanna Demetrakis, if she hears this,
Shout out
used
to
to
her.
tell me, yeah, used to tell me that, don't go chasing the flavor of the day. Don't, as an artist, just as an artist, this is not just as a filmmaker. Don't go chasing the flavor of the day. Don't change your style. Don't do that. Keep doing what you do. Then one day you'll be the flavor of the day.
Mm,
And that's what I do. I keep doing what I do, and I've done it. This will be my fourth personal film. I've done literally, I don't know, hundreds, tens of other productions, but this will be my fourth personal film, and I continue. I feel that rhythm. I continue that path.
right.
Because we had some rough times finishing Searching for Home, coming back from war, and it came back down to me, and I made the decision to move forward with what I really believed in, and I believe it was the right decision because of the success of the film as far as eyes on, and
Right.
so and the healing potential that it had. So same thing
Absolutely.
with unmasking hope. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I would be excited, and I think you're well on the path of, what you envision. And I it's clear to me the vision is there. And when the vision is there and that, like, the steps to make that vision a reality are there, it generally turns out better than we could have ever expected.
Right.
And you know, so we're closing in on about an hour. I want to, I guess, sort of ask as a wrap up question, and then also, you know, hear your final thoughts. But like, what do you envision, you know, for yourself personally? Like, what, look back at the end of the day, and you know, when it's all said and done, what do you envision as a filmmaker and, you know, as a person, your legacy being, and what you hope to have brought, you know, with your purpose and what you, you know, stood for? And I feel like I have an idea of what the answer could be, but, you know, based on what we've talked about, but I'd love to hear sort of what you view it as.
You know, I I really appreciate that question because it comes at a good time for me just to be able to just put it out in the air and put it out in the universe. Is, you know, I'm super proud of getting to a fourth film,
Mm-hmm.
because entering into these films, each one, I mean, John Milius said each film is like its own battle,
Mm-hmm.
and the director John Milius is one of my one of my icons, and so I'm very proud of that, and the legacy I'm proud of is I've stayed true to what I feel came through me as a messenger. I feel that I stayed true to where God put me in these films, and sometimes it rubs people the wrong way. I guess that's not even, but there's
Mm-hmm.
differences, and I've been through this so many times that I feel now in unmasking hope, I'm so centered that I know, even though I don't know, that I know.
Right.
And part of like part of it is understanding that I don't know, and it's part of the process, but having this deep down assuredness as an artist and a filmmaker and a compassionate human being that I'm doing the right thing. And I feel like I know that now after being in my fourth film like this. And so leaving the legacy that any of my films are very watchable. I mean, 30 years later, Faces in the Fire is still very watchable on a very human level, because it's people struggling with trauma, with life, with grief. We haven't even talked about that. I mean, my real work is grief recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And and everybody goes through that. So all of my films, you know, you can look at any of them, and yeah, maybe the techniques and stuff will age, but not the messages. And hopefully with unmasking hope, and I don't know what I'll do after unmasking hope when it's done. I don't know if I'll what will go on, but with unmasking hope, I hope it's another, I guess, jewel in the crown, you know. And and the other things, like speaking in the world economy kind of, is it's really cool to get 2 New York Times reviews that were favorable for my films,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I'm like, then I get all hung up. I'm like, well, I'm asking hope, get another good review from, then I'll have
Right.
3. And then I'm like, dude, expectations are just resentments that haven't happened yet, you know. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
stop the expectation. But going back to, I'm just proud that I have a legacy of films, and then leaving this one here that are kind of timeless, that connect in a very, very human way. It's not just about an issue. It's not just, it's about people. It's
Right.
about our soul journey. So
Absolutely. And I think that's beautiful, and a beautiful legacy to leave behind. And, you know, if after unmasking hope, you decided you never wanted to make another film, I don't know if that would be the case necessarily,
I don't think I
but
can stop.
right.
My
It's,
wife is like, okay. When I told her, I'm like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. She's like, oh yeah, you're going to come up with something else.
yeah. And, you know, but even if there was the chance you did stop, I feel like that legacy would still be
Yeah.
realized. It would still be
4
there.
is a good number, but no, 5 is
Yeah.
even better.
5 is even better, and then 6 is after that, and you know, you could just keep going on with that. um I mean, is there any, you know, last messages you wanted to leave the listeners with, or, and you know, where they can find, you know, I guess any reflections on the chat, and then also where they can find your work and, you know, engage with it further?
You know, I mean, all I have to say is empathy, you know, and develop empathy. I mean, really in this time right now, and I even find myself short on patience,
Hmm.
you know, and I make snap judgments about people. And I think we're all doing that. And it's just like, if there's anything behind my films, is a basic awareness, understanding, and empathy for people that are going through trauma, and patience. You know, we're in a time that we need patience because everybody's just snapping and everybody's coming up with the soundbite
Right.
solution to like very complex problems. But then as far as, you know, if you want to find out more about what I'm doing, is you can go to ecproductions.com. That's Eric Christiansen, ecproductions.com. And then more importantly, you know, we're in the final parts of finishing unMASKing Hope. And we do depend on donations. And they actually are donations. We work through the IDA, the International Documentary Association fiscal sponsorship program. And we have a 501c3 umbrella. And if you go to unMASKing Hope, the movie, unMASKingHopeTheMovie.com, there's a link there if you feel like donating, and also, or just follow us and find out what's going on, read more about the survivors that are in the film, and
Yeah.
just connect with us on Facebook also with unMASKing Hope, the movie there, and on Instagram also. But that's where we're at right now. We're like literally rolling into finishing this thing, and it's pretty exciting. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's
Right.
been 2 years almost to the day since we started our first actual shoot on
Mm.
this, and so we have one more year to go. We'll be wrapping the post up in June, and
Awesome.
for delivery for 9/11/2021.
Beautiful. That's
So yeah,
amazing. That's amazing. So, and I'll put all of those links that you mentioned in the episode description, so people can just,
great.
they can just scroll. It'll be right there. So everyone, do go check that out. Um, well, awesome, Eric. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I mean, I really enjoyed chatting with you. I feel like this hour sort of just flew by.
Oh my
I
gosh,
learned
it's been an hour. I know,
I
right?
know. Yeah.
This is awesome.
So,
Great. Thank you, Evan.
yeah.